Maren Grey stood at the threshold of the office building, its glass doors reflecting back a woman she barely recognized anymore. The debt collection agency occupied the third floor of a converted warehouse in the industrial quarter, where brick met steel and everything smelled faintly of rust and desperation. She'd been here 4 times in the past month. Each visit had peeled away another layer of her dignity until all that remained was the hollow understanding that she would lose everything her father had left her, including the modest apartment that had been in their family for 2 generations. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The receptionist barely glanced at her as she signed in. Maren had dressed carefully today in her only good blouse, navy blue with pearl buttons, paired with black slacks that were starting to wear thin at the knees. Professional, respectable, as though clothing could shield her from the weight of $93,000 in accumulated debt. Her father had been a dreamer, a kind man, generous to a fault, who had co-signed loans for friends who disappeared, invested in businesses that crumbled, and gambled on medical treatments that promised miracles but delivered only bills. When the stroke took him 6 months ago, Maren had inherited his warm smile in her memories and a financial crater that threatened to swallow her whole. The collection agent, a severe woman named Patricia, looked up from her desk with the expression of someone who had seen this story 1,000 times before. "Miss Grey, please, sit." Maren sat. The chair was plastic, designed for temporary discomfort. "I've reviewed your case again." Patricia's fingers moved across her tablet screen. "Unfortunately, your payment plan proposal doesn't meet the minimum requirements. The creditors are moving forward with asset seizure. You have until the end of the month to vacate the apartment." The words landed like stones. Maren had known they were coming, but knowing didn't soften the impact. "I'm working 2 jobs," Maren said, and hated how small her voice sounded. "I can pay more. Just give me a little more time." "Miss Grey, even with 2 jobs, you're earning $42,000 a year. The interest alone outpaces what you can offer. I'm sorry, but this is mathematics, not negotiation." Maren closed her eyes. Her throat felt tight. She would not cry here. Not in this fluorescent-lit room that smelled of stale coffee and broken futures. "There is one other option that's come across my desk." Maren's eyes snapped open. Patricia's expression hadn't changed, but she slid a cream-colored envelope across the desk. Heavy paper, expensive. The kind Maren hadn't seen outside of wedding invitations. "A private party has expressed interest in settling your debt in full, with all associated fees and penalties cleared, in exchange for a contractual marriage arrangement." The words seemed to rearrange themselves in Maren's mind, refusing to make sense in that order. "I'm sorry. What?" "It's not uncommon in certain circles," Patricia said, her tone suggesting this was merely another business transaction. "Wealthy individuals sometimes seek marriage arrangements for tax purposes, immigration status, social standing, or personal reasons they don't care to disclose. This particular client has requested a candidate with your specific profile." "What profile? Woman drowning in debt? Woman of good character facing unfortunate circumstances, between the ages of 24 and 28, no criminal record, no dependents, willing to relocate." Patricia tapped the envelope. "The terms are generous. Full debt clearance upon signing, a private residence, a monthly allowance. The marriage would be legally binding but would include a dissolution clause after 2 years if both parties agree." Maren stared at the envelope as though it might contain a serpent. "This is insane." "It's unusual," Patricia corrected, "but legal and documented. You're under no obligation to consider it. However, given your current situation, I was instructed to present the option." Maren's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. The paper was thick, textured. Inside, a single card bore an address in the city's historic district and a time, tomorrow, 2 o'clock. "Who is this person?" "The client values discretion. If you attend the meeting, introductions will be made properly. If you don't, your debt proceeds as previously discussed." Maren looked at the card, at Patricia's impassive face, at the industrial cityscape visible through the window behind her. She thought of her father, who had always believed something would work out, that kindness would be rewarded, that the universe bent toward grace. He'd been wrong about so much. "I'll think about it," Maren said. That night, she lay awake in the apartment she was about to lose, staring at the ceiling cracks she'd memorized over 26 years of life. The rational part of her brain cataloged every reason this was a terrible idea. Marriage to a stranger. Legal binding to someone who might be dangerous, controlling, or worse. The complete surrender of her autonomy in exchange for financial rescue. The desperate part of her brain, the part that had worked double shifts until her feet bled, that had sold her mother's jewelry and her father's book collection and everything else that could be converted to cash, whispered that she had nothing left to lose. At 1:58 the following afternoon, Maren stood outside an elegant brownstone in a neighborhood where the buildings remembered when gaslight had been innovation. The address matched the card. She'd worn the same navy blouse, paired this time with a gray skirt she'd borrowed from her coworker. She climbed the steps and knocked. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, dressed in clothing that suggested wealth without announcing it. "Miss Grey, please come in. I'm Adelaide, the household manager." The interior was beautiful in an understated way. Dark wood floors, cream walls, furniture that looked antique but not ostentatious. Everything was immaculate and faintly cool, as though sunlight rarely penetrated the heavy curtains. Adelaide led her to a study lined with books. A desk sat near the window, and behind it, a man rose to his feet. Maren's first thought was that he looked ill. He was tall and lean, with pale skin that seemed almost translucent in the dim light. His hair was pure white, though his face suggested he was perhaps in his early 30s. He wore simple clothing, dark trousers, and a charcoal sweater, nothing that suggested wealth or status. His eyes were an unusual color, pale gray that was almost silver. "Miss Grey," he said, and his voice was quiet, measured. "Thank you for coming. I'm Priam Blackthorne." He didn't offer his hand, and Maren didn't offer hers. They regarded each other across the desk like chess players studying the board. "Please, sit." She sat. He sat. Adelaide materialized with tea, poured, and vanished. "I imagine you have questions," Priam said. "Why me?" Maren asked bluntly. "Why this arrangement at all? Direct. Good." The faintest hint of approval crossed his features. "I require a wife for reasons I'm not prepared to discuss in detail. My circumstances are complicated and I value discretion. You need financial relief. The arrangement is mutually beneficial." Marriage is more than a financial transaction. Ideally, yes. In practice, it has been exactly that for most of human history. He paused. "I'm not asking you to love me, Miss Grey. I'm asking you to sign a contract, live in reasonable comfort, and allow me to introduce you as my wife when necessary. In exchange, your debt disappears, and you receive security for 2 years minimum. And if I want to leave after 2 years, the dissolution clause activates. You leave with a settlement that ensures you won't face financial hardship again." Maren studied him. He didn't look like a monster. He looked tired, frankly, and perhaps lonely, though she might have been projecting. "What aren't you telling me?" "Many things. What specifically concerns you?" "This whole situation. Men don't just marry strangers to solve their problems unless the problem is serious." "Fair." He took a sip of tea. "I need a wife to satisfy certain expectations. People in my life, my work, believe I should be settled. They're becoming insistent. I don't have time or interest in traditional courtship, and I've found that marriages based on romance often end poorly. This is honest, clear. We both know exactly what we're agreeing to." There was something sad in the way he said it, something that made Maren's chest ache unexpectedly. "I need to think about this." "Of course. Take 3 days. If you decide to proceed, we'll sign papers here. The debt will be cleared by the end of that week." He produced a document from the desk drawer, slid it across. Maren scanned it. The legal language was dense but clear. Marriage, debt assumption and clearance, residence provided, monthly allowance of $4,000, dissolution terms, no consummation requirement, she noted with relief. Separate bedrooms guaranteed if desired. 3 days, she repeated. She didn't need 3 days. She needed 1 night of lying awake, staring at ceiling cracks, running the numbers in her head. $4,000 a month was more than she currently made. The debt clearance alone was worth more than she could earn in a decade, and if he was terrible, if the situation became unbearable, she could endure for 2 years. People endured far worse for far less. The next morning, she called the number on the card and told Adelaide she would sign. The wedding, if it could be called that, happened in a lawyer's office on a Thursday afternoon. No flowers, no music, no guests beyond Adelaide and the attorney who officiated. Priam wore the same dark clothing he'd worn at their first meeting. Maren wore a cream-colored dress she'd found at a consignment shop, something simple and clean. The vows were civil, perfunctory. They signed documents. The attorney declared them legally married. Priam's expression never changed, but when the attorney left to file the paperwork, he looked at Maren with something that might have been gentleness. "I'll try to make this as painless as possible," he said. "That's a strange thing to say to your new wife. I'm not practiced at this. Neither am I." Adelaide reappeared with champagne. They toasted awkwardly. Maren took a sip and felt bubbles burst against her tongue, bright and incongruous. "I've prepared your room," Adelaide said. "Whenever you're ready, I'll show you." The house, Maren learned, was larger than she'd realized. The study and parlor she'd seen were merely the public face. Behind them stretched corridors and staircases leading to bedrooms, a library, a kitchen that looked barely used, and a garden enclosed by high walls. Her room was on the second floor, spacious and decorated in soft grays and blues, a 4-poster bed, a writing desk, a wardrobe that Adelaide opened to reveal clothing in Maren's size. "How did you know what I wore?" Maren asked, startled. "Mr. Blackthorne is thorough in his preparations." That should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt strangely thoughtful. Adelaide left her to settle in. Maren unpacked her single suitcase, her meager belongings looking lost in the generous space. She hung her few dresses beside the new ones, folded her worn pajamas into drawers that smelled of lavender. That night, dinner was served in a small dining room. Priam sat at one end of the table, Maren at the other. Adelaide had prepared chicken in some kind of cream sauce, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. It was the best meal Maren had eaten in months. They ate in silence for several minutes before Priam spoke. "Tell me about your father." Maren's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Why?" "You took on his debts. You could have walked away, declared bankruptcy, started fresh. You didn't." "He was my father." "That's not an answer." Maren set down her fork. "He was kind, foolish with money, terrible at saying no, but kind. He believed in people. When he died, walking away from his debts felt like saying he'd been wrong to be generous, wrong to trust people. I couldn't do that to his memory." Priam was quiet for a moment, his pale eyes studying her face. "That's admirably loyal." "It's impractical. Loyalty often is." They lapsed back into silence, but it felt different now, less awkward, almost comfortable. Over the following weeks, Maren settled into a routine that felt surreal in its domesticity. She woke in the comfortable bed, ate breakfast that Adelaide prepared, and spent her days reading in the library or walking the garden. Priam was often absent during daylight hours, though Adelaide mentioned vaguely that he worked nights and kept unusual hours. When he was home, they shared meals and conversation that grew gradually less stilted. He asked about her life, her interests, her opinions on books and art and the city's politics. He listened with a focus that was flattering and slightly unnerving, as though every word mattered. She learned he'd been raised in what he called old family circumstances, with expectations and rules that had shaped him. He didn't speak of his work beyond saying it involved management and family business. He was educated, well-read, and possessed a dry sense of humor that emerged unexpectedly. "You're not what I expected," Maren said one evening over dinner. "What did you expect?" "Someone more commanding, arrogant. Rich men usually are." "I'm not rich. My family is." "That's a distinction without a difference." "Not to me." He cut his food, though she'd noticed he ate very little at meals. "I've seen what arrogance does to people. It's not attractive." "What happened to make you think that?" His expression shuddered. "Past experience." not something I care to revisit." She didn't push, though curiosity burned in her. A month into the marriage, Maren realized she was happy. The thought struck her while she was reading in the library, afternoon light filtering through the curtains. She was comfortable, fed, rested. The constant anxiety that had plagued her for months had eased. And more than that, she enjoyed Priam's company. He was considerate in small ways. He remembered that she preferred tea to coffee, that she liked mysteries but not horror, that she hated the sound of ticking clocks. He asked her opinions and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. When she mentioned missing her volunteer work at the community center, he'd quietly arranged a donation in her name and encouraged her to return to it. "You don't have to buy my affection," she'd said when she found out about the donation. "I'm not buying it. I'm supporting something you care about." "Why?" "Because you matter." The words had landed softly, without drama, but they'd stayed with her. She started to notice other things too. The way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, with an expression that bordered on wonder. The way he seemed to relax when she entered a room, as though her presence eased some constant tension. The way he smiled at her terrible jokes, real smiles that transformed his serious face. She was falling for him. The realization arrived without fanfare. Just a quiet certainty one evening when he was reading across from her in the library, and she looked up to find him already watching her. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just, you're lovely when you're concentrating." Her heart had done something complicated in her chest. 2 months into their marriage, everything changed. Adelaide requested that Maren join her in the study. When Maren arrived, she found not just Adelaide but Priam and 2 others, a man and a woman, both with the same pale skin and white hair as her husband. "Maren," Priam said, and something in his tone put her on guard. "Please sit. There's something I need to tell you." She sat, her pulse picking up. The pale woman spoke first. Her voice was cold, aristocratic. "This arrangement has gone on long enough, Priam. You cannot hide her from the court forever." "I'm not hiding her. I'm protecting her." "From what?" Maren interjected. "What's going on?" Priam closed his eyes briefly, then met her gaze. "I haven't been entirely honest with you about my circumstances." Fear spiked through her. "Are you married already? Is this not legal?" "No, nothing like that. This marriage is entirely legal and binding." He paused. "I'm not human, Maren. I'm a vampire. And I'm not a minor noble or businessman. I'm the king of the vampire realm." The words hung in the air, impossible and absurd. Maren laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. "That's not funny. It's not a joke." Priam's expression was pained. "I'm sorry. I should have told you from the beginning." The pale man stepped forward. "I am Lord Severin, head of the High Council. This is Lady Thessa. We've come because your secret has been discovered, Your Majesty, and the court is in an uproar. You married a human commoner without consulting the council, without proper ceremony, and you've kept her hidden like a shameful secret." Maren's mind was reeling. "Vampires. You're saying vampires are real?" "Yes," Priam said quietly. "Prove it." He looked at her for a long moment, then opened his mouth. His canines lengthened into fangs, sharp and white. His eyes, already pale, seemed to catch the light differently, almost glowing. Maren stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "I know this is a shock," Priam began. "A shock?" Her voice came out too loud. "You lied to me. You married me under false pretenses." "I married you under a legal contract that you signed willingly. Because I thought you were human. I thought this was a business arrangement with a weird but basically normal man, not—" She gestured wildly at his face, at the fangs that had already retracted. "Not this." Lady Thessa's expression was something between pity and disdain. "She's hysterical. This is precisely why the marriage should be annulled. She's unsuitable for the throne." "The marriage will not be annulled," Priam said, his voice dropping into a tone of absolute authority that Maren had never heard from him before. "Maren is my wife, and she will be recognized as such. The council will never accept a human queen." Lord Severin said, especially not one chosen in secret, without consultation or ceremony. You've compromised your position, Your Majesty. There are those calling for your abdication. Maren's head was spinning. King, throne, council. These words attached themselves to the quiet man who'd shared dinner with her, who'd asked about her father, who'd smiled at her jokes. I need air, she said. Maren. Priam reached for her. She stepped back. Don't. I just need a minute, please. She fled the study, Adelaide calling after her, but she kept going. Through the corridors, out into the garden, into the cool evening air that felt shockingly normal against her skin. Vampires were real. Priam was a king. She'd married royalty without knowing it, and apparently that marriage was causing some kind of political crisis. She sank onto a garden bench, her legs suddenly unreliable. A rustle of fabric, and Adelaide sat beside her. The older woman looked different now that Maren was looking for it. The too pale skin, the way she moved with unusual grace. You're one too, Maren said. I am. How long have vampires existed? Longer than written history. We've always been here, living alongside humanity in the shadows. And Priam is really a king? The king. He rules the entire vampire realm, every house and territory. His word is law among our kind. Maren tried to reconcile this with the quiet man who'd eaten dinner across from her, who'd listened to her ramble about terrible mystery novels. Why did he hide it? Why marry me at all? Adelaide was quiet for a moment. His Majesty was married once before, centuries ago, a political marriage arranged by the council to unite two powerful houses. His wife saw only the crown, only the power. She used him, manipulated him, cared nothing for the man beneath the title. When she died, he swore his next marriage would be different. He wanted to be chosen as himself, not as a throne. Maren's anger wavered, complicated by understanding. So he lied. He omitted, and yes, that was wrong. But Maren, I've served His Majesty for 200 years. I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past months. With you, he's not performing kingship. He's just himself. What does he expect from me now? To put on a crown and pretend I know how to be queen of a species I didn't know existed until 10 minutes ago? I suspect he expects you to decide what you want, whether the man you've come to know is worth the complications his title brings. Maren sat with that, watching the garden shadows lengthen. Did she love him? Yes, she realized. She'd fallen for the quiet, thoughtful man who'd given her safety and kindness when she'd had nothing. Did it matter that he was a vampire, that he was king, that their marriage had become an international incident in a world she'd never known existed? She didn't know. She returned to the house to find Lord Severin and Lady Thessa gone. Priam stood in the parlor, staring out the window, his posture rigid with tension. They've left, he said without turning. But they'll be back. The council is convening an emergency session in 3 days. They'll demand I appear and answer for the marriage. And if you don't, then they'll vote to strip me of authority and place a regent in power until I comply. Can they do that? If enough of the council votes yes, they can do anything. He finally turned to face her. I'm sorry, Maren. I should have told you everything from the beginning. I justified the deception by telling myself the contract was honest about the practical matters, but I robbed you of full informed consent. That was wrong. She'd expected defensiveness or arrogance. The plain apology disarmed her. Why me? She asked again, the question taking on new dimensions. You're a king. You could have chosen anyone. I didn't want anyone. I wanted someone real, someone who needed what I could offer, and who could perhaps see me rather than my position. He smiled sadly. I chose poorly, it seems. I've put you in an impossible situation. What happens to me if the marriage is annulled? Your debt remains cleared. You keep the settlement from our contract. You return to your life. And you? I'll make another political marriage. Unite a powerful house. Strengthen alliances. Do what's expected of a king. His voice was hollow. Maren crossed the room to him. Up close, she could see the details she'd never questioned before: the too perfect skin, the eyes that caught light like an animal's, the complete absence of breath or heartbeat. You're really not human. No. And you're really a king. Yes. Do you drink blood? Yes. Animal blood, usually. I haven't fed from a human in decades. He paused. That's not a temptation with you, if you're worried. I'd never hurt you. I know. And oddly, she did. This was still the man who'd made sure her tea was the right temperature, who'd asked about her dreams, who'd looked at her like she was something precious. I need time to think about all of this, she said. But I'm not running away. Not yet. Relief broke across his face like dawn. Take all the time you need. The next 2 days were surreal. Adelaide gently educated Maren about vampire society, the houses and hierarchies, the blood laws that governed feeding, the sun sensitivity that kept most vampires active only at night, the long lifespans that made centuries feel like years. How old is Priam? Maren asked. His Majesty is 943 years old. The number was incomprehensible. And he's been king for how long? 500 years. He was elevated young after the previous monarch died without heirs. He's been a good king, fair and steady, but he's always been solitary. I think centuries of ruling made it hard for him to trust anyone close. Maren thought of his careful solitude, the way he seemed most relaxed when it was just the two of them. Does he have friends? Family? Distant cousins in various houses, allies and advisors. But friends? Adelaide shook her head. I think he's been lonely for a very long time. That night, Priam found Maren in the library. She'd been reading a history book Adelaide had provided, trying to understand the world she'd stumbled into. May I? He asked, gesturing to the chair beside her. It's your house. It's our house. He sat, but didn't speak immediately. Finally, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it. If you want the marriage annulled, I won't fight you. Even though it'll cause political problems, your freedom matters more than my politics. Maren set down the book. Adelaide told me about your first marriage. He went very still. Did she? She said your first wife only cared about the crown. That's accurate. Is that why you hid who you were from me? You wanted to be sure I married the man, not the title? Yes, though I see now how unfair that was. I got to evaluate you fully informed while you were making a decision based on partial information. It was manipulative, Maren agreed. Yes, but I understand why you did it. She reached out, hesitated, then took his hand. His skin was cool, but not unpleasantly so. I married you thinking you were a minor noble with a business career. Learning you're a king is a lot. But the person I've come to care about, the man who asks about my day and remembers what books I like, that person is the same, isn't he? Yes, he said quietly. I'm still that person. Then I need you to be honest with me from now on. No more secrets. I swear it. And I need to understand what being your wife actually means, what's expected, what I'm walking into. The council will demand your presentation at court. They'll test you, try to prove you're unsuitable. They'll be cruel, Maren. These are vampires who've played political games for centuries. They'll see you as an interloper and a weakness. How do I prove I'm not? You can't. Not to them. They've already decided. His grip on her hand tightened. But you can prove it to yourself. Adelaide can teach you our protocols and history. I can prepare you for the council's tactics. But ultimately, you'll have to stand before them and decide whether you're willing to fight for this marriage. Are you willing to fight for it? Yes. No hesitation. I married you because I wanted a partnership built on honesty and mutual respect. I failed the honesty part initially, but Maren, these past 2 months have been the happiest I've had in centuries. You see me. You argue with me when you disagree. You make me laugh. I don't want to lose that. Maren's heart was beating very fast. I don't want to lose it either. He lifted her hand and pressed it to his cheek, a gesture of such vulnerability that her breath caught. Then we'll face the council together, he said. The council convened in a place Maren had never imagined existed, a vast underground complex beneath the city, lit by what Adelaide called moonstone lamps. The chambers were beautiful in a cold, ancient way, marble and silver, carvings that depicted centuries of vampire history, and at the center, a circular chamber with 13 high-backed chairs arranged in a crescent. Maren wore a dress Adelaide had selected, deep midnight blue with silver embroidery. Her hair was arranged in a style that felt formal without being ostentatious. She looked like she belonged, even if she didn't feel it. Priam walked beside her, and he was transformed. Gone was the quiet, casually dressed man from their home. Here, he wore clothing that spoke of authority, black and silver, with a heavy chain of office across his shoulders. His bearing was different too, regal and commanding. This was the king. But when he glanced at her, his eyes held warmth. "Remember, you're my equal here. Whatever they say, you don't bow to anyone but me, and you don't do that unless you choose to." The council chamber filled with vampires, some taking seats in the crescent, others standing in witness. All of them had the same pale, ageless beauty. All of them watched Maren with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Lord Severin stood at the center. "This council is convened to address the matter of His Majesty's recent marriage. Your Majesty, please approach with your wife." The pause before wife was deliberate. Priam led Maren to the center of the chamber. She could feel every eye on her, assessing, judging. "Your Majesty," Severin began, "you married in secret without consulting this council, without proper ceremony, and without regard for tradition or political alliance. Worse, you married a human, a commoner, a woman with no family, no resources, and nothing to offer the throne but debt and scandal." Maren felt her face flush, but Priam's voice was ice cold when he responded. "I married a woman of integrity, intelligence, and courage. Those qualities matter more to me than bloodline or political advantage." Lady Thessa rose. "You married for sentiment. That's a luxury kings cannot afford. The stability of our realm requires strategic alliances. Your marriage provides nothing but questions about your judgment." "My judgment led me to a woman who accepted my proposal knowing nothing of my true position," Priam said. "She married me as a man, not as a crown. That's worth more than any political alliance." "How touching," Thessa said acidly. "And when she ages and dies in the blink of an eye, will your sentimentality have been worth the damage to the throne's credibility?" The words hit Maren like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on the political crisis that she hadn't thought about the implications of their different lifespans. "That's my concern, not yours," Priam said. "It's all our concern when the king makes decisions that affect the realm." Lord Severin stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this council formally requests that you annul this marriage and enter negotiations for a proper union with Lady Thessa, uniting your house with hers and stabilizing the succession." Maren's head snapped toward Thessa, who smiled slightly. "No," Priam said flatly. "You're refusing a direct request from your council? I'm refusing an overreach of your authority. My marriage is my choice. The council exists to advise, not command. And if we vote to censure you, to declare your judgment compromised, then you'll have to live with a censured king because I'm not annulling my marriage." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Severin raised a hand for silence. "Perhaps," he said, turning to Maren with a predatory smile, "we should hear from the Queen herself. Tell us, Miss Grey." "Mrs. Blackthorne," Maren corrected, her voice stronger than she felt. Severin's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Blackthorne, then. Do you understand what you've stepped into? You're human, fragile. You'll age while your husband remains unchanging. You have no knowledge of our society, our laws, our ways. What could you possibly offer as queen?" Maren's throat felt tight, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "You're right that I don't know your laws or traditions. I've had 3 days to learn about a species I didn't know existed, but I know something about struggling. I know about loyalty and sacrifice. I know about choosing to honor commitments even when they're difficult." She paused. "My father died leaving me drowning in debt. I could have walked away, started fresh. Instead, I worked myself to exhaustion trying to honor his memory. When Priam offered me a way out through marriage, I accepted because I had nothing left to lose. But over the past 2 months, I gained something I hadn't expected: a partnership with someone who saw me as a person, not a problem. Someone who listened and cared and made me feel like I mattered. She looked at Priam, then back at the council. You say I have nothing to offer as queen. Maybe you're right. But I offer Priam something. He told me he'd been missing someone who chose him for himself, not his crown. If that's worthless to you, then I don't think I want to be part of your world anyway. Silence fell. Lady Thessa's expression had shifted from disdain to calculation. How very moving, she said. But emotion doesn't govern a realm. When the novelty fades, Your Majesty, and you're left with a human queen who cannot give you heirs, who will die long before you, what then? Then I'll have had however many years with her that fate allows, Priam said. I've lived 9 centuries, Lady Thessa. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched countless political marriages crumble into resentment and manipulation. I chose differently this time, and I don't regret it. Even if it costs you the throne? Severin asked. Even then. The words hung in the air, absolute and final. Lord Severin looked around the chamber at the assembled vampires. This council will vote. All in favor of demanding the marriage's annulment, signify. 8 hands rose. All opposed. 4 hands, including one Maren hadn't expected, a younger vampire in the back who'd been silent until now. The measure fails to achieve the required majority, Severin said, his tone sour. The marriage stands. However, if Mrs. Blackthorne is to be recognized as queen, she must undergo the traditional trials to prove her suitability. What trials? Maren asked. Adelaide had mentioned nothing about trials. Priam's expression darkened. The trials haven't been invoked in 4 centuries. Then it's time to restore tradition, Thessa said smoothly. 3 challenges to prove mental acuity, physical courage, and moral character. If she passes, the council will formally recognize her as queen. If she fails even one, the marriage is annulled. This is absurd, Priam said. No other consort has been subjected to. No other consort was human, Severin interrupted. We're being generous, Your Majesty. We could simply refuse recognition entirely. The trials at least give her a chance to prove herself. Maren touched Priam's arm. I'll do it. He looked at her sharply. Maren, you don't have to. Yes, I do. They're never going to accept me otherwise. At least this way there's a clear path forward. The trials can be dangerous. Then prepare me. She saw pride flash across his face, quickly controlled. Very well, he said, addressing the council. My wife accepts your trial terms. When do we begin? Tomorrow evening, Severin said. That should give her time to prepare. The dismissal was clear. Priam led Maren from the chamber, his hand steady on her back. Once they were in the corridor beyond, his composure cracked. I'm sorry. I didn't anticipate they'd invoke the trials. It's an archaic tradition, and they're using it to humiliate you. What exactly are these trials? They vary depending on who's administering them. The mental trial usually involves solving a complex problem or riddle. The physical trial tests courage, often putting the candidate in danger. The moral trial is the most subjective. They'll create a scenario designed to force a choice between competing values. Have people died in these trials? Not in centuries, but they've been traumatized, certainly. Maren took a breath. Then we make sure I'm ready. They spent the next 24 hours in intensive preparation. Adelaide drilled Maren on vampire history, politics, and protocol. Priam walked her through logic puzzles and ethical dilemmas. They discussed strategy, likely scenarios, ways to think on her feet. The key, Priam said, is not to give them what they expect. They expect you to be frightened, ignorant, easily manipulated. Be calm, be thoughtful, and remember, you're not trying to prove you're a vampire. You're proving you're worthy of standing beside one. That night, lying in bed, Maren stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. She thought about her father, who'd always said the universe bent toward grace. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe this impossible situation was grace in a strange form, a chance to become something more than she'd imagined possible. Or maybe she'd fail spectacularly and return to ordinary life, a story too strange to tell. She slept poorly and woke to Adelaide's gentle insistence that she eat something, even if her stomach was in knots. The first trial convened at sunset in a chamber filled with books and scrolls. Lord Severin presided with several other council members as witnesses. "The trial of mental acuity," he announced. "Mrs. Blackthorne, you will be presented with a governance scenario. You have 1 hour to propose a solution. Your answer will be judged for wisdom, creativity, and understanding of vampire society." He handed her a scroll. Maren unrolled it and read. The scenario involved a dispute between two vampire houses over territory in a city's financial district. One house claimed historical rights going back 3 centuries. The other claimed current utility and economic contribution. Both threatened to take the dispute to violence if not resolved in their favor. As queen, how would she mediate? Maren read it twice, her mind racing. She thought about what Adelaide had taught her about vampire law, about the importance of honor and precedent, but also about the pragmatic need for stability. She began to write. Her solution proposed a shared governance model where both houses maintained presence in the territory, with a rotating schedule for primary administrative authority. The house with historical claim would hold ceremonial precedence, while the house with economic contribution would manage day-to-day operations. Both would benefit, neither would lose face, and the precedent would provide a framework for similar disputes. She handed the scroll to Severin and waited while he and the other council members read. "Adequate," Severin said finally, though his tone suggested grudging respect. "You've demonstrated basic problem-solving ability. The trial of mental acuity is passed." 1 down. The second trial took place in a different chamber, this one open to a courtyard under the night sky. Lady Thessa presided. "The trial of physical courage," she announced. "You need not have a vampire's strength to be queen, but you must have the courage to face danger without faltering." She gestured, and 3 vampires stepped forward. They were young, dressed for combat, and their eyes held hunger. "These are trained hunters from our warrior houses," Thessa said. "They will pursue you through the Undercroft for precisely 10 minutes. If you can evade capture for that time, you pass. If they catch you, you fail. And Mrs. Blackthorne, they will not be gentle." Maren's heart hammered. "And if I'm hurt?" "We have excellent healers. You won't die." Thessa smiled. "Probably." Priam, standing in the witness area, looked furious, but he'd been forbidden to intervene. "You have 1 minute to prepare, starting now." Maren looked around the courtyard. Exits led to corridors, and beyond them, the Undercroft, a maze of tunnels and chambers beneath the council complex. She'd never been there, had no map, no advantage, except she was small, and humans were underestimated. "Begin," Thessa commanded. Maren ran. She chose a corridor at random, sprinting into the darkness. Behind her, she heard the hunters laugh, confident and cruel. They were faster than her, stronger, could probably see better in the dark. But she'd grown up in a city where you learned to navigate by sound and memory, and she was motivated by something they weren't, the absolute certainty that she couldn't let Priam down. She took turns randomly at first, building distance, then started to listen. The Undercroft had echoes, weird acoustics. She could hear the hunters spreading out, searching. She slipped into a side chamber, pressed herself against the wall, and controlled her breathing. One hunter passed within feet of her hiding spot. She waited until his footsteps faded, then moved in the opposite direction. Time blurred. She climbed, crawled, doubled back, used every trick she'd learned from years of navigating the city on no money. How to be small, how to be still, how to blend into shadows. A bell chimed. 10 minutes. She emerged from a corridor to find Thessa waiting, expression sour. "You passed, barely." Maren's legs felt like water, but she stood straight. "I'll take barely." 2 down. The final trial was held in a small chamber with only Severin, Priam, and one other council member present. "The trial of moral character," Severin said. "This will be simple, Mrs. Blackthorne. We will ask you one question. Answer honestly and you pass. Lie and we'll know." Maren's instincts prickled. Nothing about this felt simple. "Your Majesty," Severin said, turning to Priam, "please leave the room." "No," Priam said. "The trial requires privacy." "Then modify the trial." Severin's smile was cold. "Very well. Mrs. Blackthorne, here is your question. If you could return to the moment before you married His Majesty, knowing everything you know now about what he is and what this marriage would cost you, would you still say yes?" The chamber went silent. Maren understood the trap immediately. If she said no, she'd admit the marriage was a mistake. If she said yes, they'd claim she was lying to appease Priam, who was standing right there. She looked at Priam. His expression was carefully neutral, but she saw fear in his eyes, fear that she'd regret him. "Yes," she said clearly. "I would still say yes." "Why?" Severin pressed. "You've been attacked in trials, faced political hostility, learned your husband isn't even your species. You could have had a simple life." "I had a simple life," Maren said. "I was drowning in debt and desperation. Priam offered me a chance at something different, and yes, it's been complicated and frightening and strange, but it's also been the first time in years I've felt like I mattered to someone. The first time I've been happy. So yes, knowing everything, I'd still choose this. I'd still choose him." She wasn't looking at Severin anymore. She was looking at Priam, and the expression on his face was worth every difficulty of the past weeks. Severin looked between them, then sighed. "The trial of moral character is past. The council recognizes Maren Blackthorne as queen consort." The words should have felt triumphant. Instead, Maren just felt exhausted. Priam crossed the room and took her hands. "You were extraordinary. I was terrified. That's what made it extraordinary." They returned to the house as dawn was breaking. Maren had never been so happy to see the familiar walls, the garden, the peaceful quiet of their home. Adelaide met them with warm tea and a knowing smile. "I hear congratulations are in order, Your Majesty." "Please don't call me that," Maren said. "I'm still just me." "You're queen now. That's rather more than just you." Maren sank into a chair. Priam sat beside her, closer than he'd allowed himself before, and she leaned into his side. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we navigate. The council will expect you at formal functions. There will be politics and protocol. But Maren, you don't have to be anything other than yourself. That's all I've ever wanted." She turned to look at him. In the early morning light filtering through the curtains, he looked tired, though Adelaide had explained vampires didn't tire the same way humans did. Emotionally drained then. "I meant what I said in the trial," Maren told him. "I would choose this again. Choose you. Even though I'm a 900-year-old vampire king who lied to you about everything important. You didn't lie about being kind, or thoughtful, or lonely." She reached up and touched his face. Those things were real. He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "I love you. I should have said it before, but I've been afraid. I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable. But I love you, Maren. You've given me something I thought I'd lost centuries ago. Hope that I could be more than just a crown." Her eyes stung with sudden tears. "I love you too. You gave me safety when I had nothing. And then you gave me yourself. How could I not love you?" He kissed her then, gentle and sure, and it felt like coming home. The following weeks brought new challenges. Maren was introduced formally at court, a ceremony that involved elaborate clothing, ancient rituals, and dozens of vampires examining her with varying degrees of skepticism. She navigated it with Adelaide's coaching and Priam's steady presence at her side. She learned that being queen meant attending councils, mediating disputes, representing the crown at functions. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. But there were also quiet moments. Evenings in the library with Priam, where they read together in comfortable silence, walks in the garden at night when he could be outside without discomfort. Conversations that ranged from philosophy to gossip to dreams for the future. "I keep thinking about what Lady Thessa said," Maren admitted one night. "About me aging and dying while you stay the same." Priam was quiet for a moment. "I think about it too." "Does it bother you?" "It terrifies me," he said honestly. "The thought of losing you. But Maren, I'd rather have decades with you than centuries with someone I don't love. Whatever time we have, it will be worth it. There's no way to... can humans become vampires? There are ways. Turning is possible, though dangerous and irreversible. But it's your choice, always. I would never pressure you. If I wanted to, someday, would you do it?" He looked at her with such intensity that her breath caught. "If you chose it freely, understanding what it means, yes. But there's no rush, Maren. You have time to decide what kind of life you want." She nodded, filing the information away. It was comforting to know the option existed, even if she wasn't ready to consider it seriously yet. 3 months into her role as queen, Maren faced her first major political crisis. A vampire house in the Southern Territories had been caught feeding on humans without consent, violating the strict blood laws that governed vampire-human interaction. The council convened to decide punishment. Some argued for exile, others for execution. The debate grew heated, with various factions using the incident to advance their own agendas. Priam presided with calm authority, but Maren could see the tension in his shoulders. This was the kind of decision that could fracture alliances and create new enemies. During a recess, she pulled him aside. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "Exile is traditional, but it's also ineffective. Exiled vampires often return to cause more problems. Execution is harsh, but sends a clear message that blood laws matter." "What about restitution?" He blinked. "What?" "The victims. What happens to them in either scenario?" "They're compensated usually, given money to help them forget or relocate." "That seems inadequate. These people were violated, traumatized. What if the punishment included mandatory service? The offending vampires have to work with human organizations, contribute to human welfare in measurable ways, under supervision, for a set period. They face the humanity of the people they harmed, and the victims get a voice in what that service looks like." Priam stared at her. "That's not traditional." "Traditional doesn't seem to be working if this keeps happening." He was silent for a long moment, then smiled. "You're right. It's not traditional. It's better." He brought her proposal to the council. There was pushback, of course, but enough council members saw the wisdom in it that the measure passed. The offending vampires were sentenced to supervised community service in human cities, with their activities monitored and reported back to the victims, who had input into the service requirements. It was a small shift, but it felt significant. Maren had contributed something meaningful, changed the way justice worked in a realm that was still strange to her. That night, Priam found her in their bedroom. They'd been sharing a room for the past month, a shift that had happened gradually and naturally. "The council is talking about your proposal," he said. "Some of them are actually impressed." Severin looked like he'd swallowed something bitter when he admitted it had merit. Maren laughed. "I'll take that as a victory." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "You're changing things here, making the realm better. I knew you would. You couldn't have known that. I didn't even know that. I know you, Maren. Your capacity for compassion and justice. I knew you'd bring that here." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the absence of heartbeat that she'd grown used to. "I'm still figuring out how to be queen, but I think I'm starting to understand what it means to be your partner. You've understood that from the beginning. I'm the one who's been learning." They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, as the night deepened outside. Months became a year. Maren's role as queen solidified. She developed relationships with some council members, maintained wary truces with others. She launched initiatives that bridged vampire and human communities, creating programs for safe feeding arrangements and cultural exchange. Not everyone approved, but change was happening. And through it all, Her love for Priam deepened. She learned his rhythms, the way he thought, the things that made him laugh. She discovered he was terrible at card games and wonderful at strategy. He was patient to a fault, except when it came to protecting her, at which point his control evaporated into fierce protectiveness. One evening, as they walked through the garden, Maren stopped by the fountain. "I've been thinking about what we discussed, about turning." Priam went very still. "And?" "I want to do it. Not right now, but someday. I want to have more than a few decades with you. I want centuries. It's not an easy process, Maren. It's painful, and there's always a risk of failure. I know, but I also know that I love you, and I want a future that doesn't have an expiration date hanging over it." He cupped her face in his hands. "Are you certain? This isn't a decision to make for me. It has to be what you want for yourself. I want it. I want to be part of this world fully. I want to stand beside you not just as a human queen playing dress-up, but as your equal in every way." His smile was radiant. "Then we'll do it. When you're ready, I'll turn you myself. I won't trust anyone else with something so precious." They set a date for 6 months out, giving Maren time to prepare mentally and physically. Adelaide began coaching her on what to expect, the pain and the transformation, the way her senses would change. "It's like being reborn," Adelaide said. "Everything you were remains, but enhanced, stronger, faster, sharper. You'll see the world differently." "Will I still be me?" "More yourself than ever. The turning amplifies what's already there, your compassion, your courage, your stubbornness." Adelaide smiled. "You'll be magnificent." 2 weeks before the scheduled turning, disaster struck. Maren was attending a function at a neutral house, a gathering of various vampire families meant to celebrate a treaty anniversary. Priam was delayed at a council meeting and planned to join her later. The attack came without warning. One moment, Maren was making conversation with a diplomat from an eastern house. The next, armed vampires burst into the hall, their faces covered, weapons drawn. "Nobody move," their leader commanded. Maren recognized the voice. "Lady Thessa." "This is treason," someone shouted. "This is correction," Thessa replied. She pointed at Maren. "That human has corrupted our king, weakened our realm with her bleeding heart policies and human sympathies. We're restoring proper order." Maren's security detail moved to protect her, but they were outnumbered. Thessa's forces had planned well. "Don't hurt them," Maren said quickly. "I'll come with you quietly. Just don't hurt anyone." Thessa smiled. "How noble. Bring her." They took her to the Undercroft, to chambers she'd only seen briefly during her trials. Thessa dismissed most of her forces, leaving just 2 guards. "What do you want?" Maren asked, working to keep her voice steady. "I want you gone. You're a stain on the throne, a weakness in the crown. Priam should have married me, united our houses, strengthened the realm. Instead, he chose sentiment over strategy, and it's made him vulnerable." "So you're staging a coup because you weren't chosen?" Thessa's eyes flashed. "I'm saving the realm from a king who's forgotten what matters: power, stability, strength. Not love stories and reform policies that coddle humans. Priam will never forgive this. You've just destroyed any chance you had at influencing him. I don't need his forgiveness. By morning, I'll have his crown." Thessa leaned close. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to write a letter explaining that you're leaving voluntarily, that you've realized you're unsuitable for this world, that you release Priam from the marriage. Then you're going to disappear. Go back to the human world where you belong. And if I refuse, then people start dying. Your security team, for starters. Then Adelaide. Then any vampire who's shown you loyalty. Their blood will be on your hands." Maren's mind raced. She had no weapons, no phone, no way to signal for help. The guards were between her and the exit. Even if she ran, she wouldn't make it far, but she wasn't helpless. She'd passed the trials. She'd learned to think strategically. "Give me the paper," she said. Thessa smiled and handed over writing materials. Maren began to write, making it look like she was complying. But instead of the letter Thessa wanted, she wrote a message, a confession from Thessa outlining the coup, the threats, the plan to seize power. She wrote it in the formal language Adelaide had taught her, the kind of document that would hold weight in vampire law. She wrote slowly, buying time, knowing Priam would have heard about the attack by now, would be searching for her. "Hurry up," Thessa snapped. "You want it to be convincing, don't you? I'm making it believable." Minutes crawled. Maren's hand cramped, but she kept writing, adding details that would make the document legally binding. Finally, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside, moving fast. Thessa heard it too. Her expression shifted from smug to alarmed. The door exploded inward. Priam stood in the doorway, and Maren had never seen him look like this. His eyes were glowing silver, his fangs fully extended, his posture radiating lethal intent. This wasn't the quiet man from their home. This was a king prepared to destroy anyone who threatened his queen. "Step away from her," he said, his voice dropping into registers that made the air vibrate. Thessa's guards moved to block him, but they were too slow. Priam moved with speed that blurred, disarming them both before they could react. They went down hard. "Priam, wait," Thessa said, her confidence cracking. "This is for the realm's good. You took my wife, threatened her life, staged a coup against the crown." He advanced into the room. "Give me one reason I shouldn't end you right now. I have supporters. Kill me, and you'll have civil war. Try me." Maren stood, still holding the papers. "Priam, I have something." His attention snapped to her, and some of the rage in his expression eased. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, but look at this." She handed him the document she'd written. He scanned it, and something like fierce pride crossed his face. "You got her confession in writing." "She thought I was writing a resignation letter. I figured a legal document was more useful." Thessa lunged for the papers, but Priam caught her wrist effortlessly. "This document," he said, "written in your presence, with your implicit consent, constitutes a binding confession under vampire law. You've just handed us everything we need to try you for treason." Thessa's face went white. "You can't. My house will. Your house will abandon you the moment they see this evidence. You've lost, Thessa." More vampires arrived, including Lord Severin and several guards loyal to the crown. They took Thessa and her accomplices into custody. Severin examined the document Maren had written, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked at her. "This is expertly done. Legally sound, every detail documented. You've provided everything needed for a conviction." "I had a good teacher," Maren said, glancing at Adelaide, who had arrived with the reinforcements. Severin actually smiled, just slightly. "Her Majesty continues to exceed expectations." Later, back at the house, Priam held Maren so tightly she could barely breathe. "When I heard you'd been taken," he said against her hair, "I thought I'd go mad. The idea of losing you, of not getting there in time. I'm fine. I knew you'd come. You shouldn't have had to wait for rescue. I should have been there to protect you." She pulled back to look at him. "Priam, I don't need you to protect me from everything. I need you to trust me to handle what I can and be there for what I can't. Today I handled it until you arrived. That's partnership." He searched her face, then nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry, I know. But I'm here. We're both here. Thessa's in custody, her coup failed, and we have a really impressive legal document to show for it." That startled a laugh out of him. "Only you would turn a kidnapping into a documentation opportunity. Adelaide taught me that proper records solve most problems." They were both exhausted, emotionally wrung out, but safe, together. The trial of Lady Thessa and her co-conspirators was swift. The evidence was overwhelming, and her house, as Priam had predicted, disavowed her actions immediately. She was sentenced to exile beyond the realm's borders, stripped of title and property. It sent a clear message: attempts against the crown would not be tolerated. But more than that, it demonstrated Maren's capability. She'd faced a life-threatening situation and emerged not just alive, but with the evidence needed to resolve it legally. The council's respect for her shifted. She wasn't just the human queen anymore. She was a political operator who could think under pressure. The date of Maren's turning arrived on a cool autumn evening. They'd chosen to do it at the house in private, with only Adelaide present. Maren wasn't afraid exactly, but she was nervous. This was irreversible. Once turned, there was no going back to human life. Priam sat beside her on the bed, his expression serious. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "I'll love you regardless of your choice." "I'm sure. I want this. I want centuries with you." He nodded. "It's going to hurt. There's no way around that. The venom needs to transform your entire system, but I'll be here the entire time, and it will pass. You'll emerge stronger. I trust you." He kissed her gently, then tilted her head to expose her neck. His fangs extended, and she felt a moment of primal fear before his bite pierced her skin. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, fire in her bloodstream, burning through every nerve. She tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't work. Priam held her, murmuring reassurances she couldn't quite hear through the roaring in her ears. Time became meaningless. There was only pain and heat and the sense of her body breaking down and rebuilding. Then, slowly, the pain began to ebb. Sensation returned in strange ways. She could hear Adelaide's heartbeat in the next room, smell the specific type of polish used on the furniture, feel the individual threads in the bedsheet beneath her. She opened her eyes. The world was different, sharper, clearer, full of details she'd never noticed. Colors were more vivid, sounds had texture. She could feel the air moving against her skin with perfect precision, and Priam, sitting beside her, looked like himself, but more so. She could see the exact silver of his eyes, the way his pupils dilated when he looked at her, the faint traces of ancient scars that immortality had nearly erased. "How do you feel?" he asked. Maren sat up, testing her new body. Stronger, definitely, more coordinated. Her senses were almost overwhelming in their intensity. Different, good different. She looked at her hands. Her skin was paler now, taking on the characteristic vampire pallor. "I'm really a vampire." "You are. Welcome to immortality." She laughed, and the sound was strange to her enhanced hearing. "This is going to take some getting used to. We have time." Over the following weeks, Adelaide helped Maren adjust to her new existence, learning to control enhanced strength so she didn't break everything she touched, managing heightened senses so she wasn't constantly overwhelmed, navigating the sun sensitivity that meant she'd be primarily nocturnal from now on. And feeding. That was perhaps the strangest adjustment. But Adelaide taught her the protocols, the ethical ways to feed from willing donors or preserved blood supplies. It wasn't romantic or dramatic, just another aspect of survival. The first time she appeared at court as a vampire queen rather than a human one, the atmosphere shifted palpably. She was no longer an outsider, no longer fragile. She was one of them now, with the strength and immortality to prove it. Lord Severin approached her during the reception following that first appearance. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. I underestimated you. Many of us did." "And now?" Maren asked. "Now I see a queen who passed the trials, survived a coup, and chose transformation to stand equally beside her king. That's not weakness. That's dedication. Thank you. The council would like to formalize your position, not as queen consort, but as co-ruler, equal authority with His Majesty. It's unprecedented, but then, so are you." Maren was speechless. Priam, standing nearby, was smiling. "I told them I wouldn't accept unless you agreed," he said. "But Maren, you've earned this. You've proven yourself over and over. Rule with me, truly, equally." She thought of the debt-ridden woman who'd walked into a collection agency office a year and a half ago, desperate and afraid. That woman would never have imagined this moment. But that woman had also been brave enough to take a chance on a strange marriage proposal, and that bravery had led here. "I accept," she said. The formal coronation happened a month later. Where her first introduction to court had been rushed and contentious, this ceremony was magnificent. The ancient chamber was filled with representatives from every vampire house, witnesses to history. Priam placed the crown on her head himself, a delicate silver circlet that had been forged specifically for her. When he stepped back, they stood side by side, equal monarchs. The crowd bowed. Later, in the quiet of their home, they stood in the garden under stars that Maren could now see with perfect clarity. "I have something for you," Priam said. He handed her a document. She recognized it immediately, the original debt collection notice from her father's creditors, the one that had driven her to that desperate meeting in the collection agency. "I thought you'd cleared that debt," she said. "I did, but I kept the original paperwork, and today I had it formally pardoned as your first official act as queen. It's on record now that your father's debts were forgiven, not just paid. His memory is cleared of obligation." Maren felt her eyes sting with tears that her vampire body could still produce. "You didn't have to do that. You loved him. He deserved better than to be remembered as the man who left you drowning in debt. Now he'll be remembered as the man who raised a queen." She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it: gratitude, love, joy, hope for their future. When they broke apart, Priam smiled. "So, Your Majesty, how does it feel to have saved yourself from debt, survived vampire politics, passed impossible trials, stopped a coup, became a vampire, and ended up ruling a kingdom you didn't know existed?" Maren laughed. "Exhausting, exhilarating, completely surreal. Any regrets?" She thought about the question seriously. Yes, the past year and a half had been chaotic and frightening and utterly bizarre, but it had also been filled with love and purpose and growth beyond anything she'd imagined. "Not a single one," she said. "I married a man to escape my debt, never knowing he ruled the whole kingdom. And somehow, impossibly, it was the best decision I ever made. I married a woman thinking I'd found a simple partnership. I found a queen instead, someone who challenged me, changed my realm for the better, and taught me what love could actually mean. We're quite a pair. We are." He pulled her close. "What do you want to do now? We have centuries ahead of us. We could travel, reform more policies, expand diplomatic relations with the human world. What does Queen Maren want?" She considered. The future stretched ahead, vast and full of possibility. She had power now, resources, immortality. She could do so much. "Right now," she said, "I want to stand here in our garden with the man I love and just be grateful for everything that led us here. The politics and reforms can wait until tomorrow." "That sounds perfect." They stood together under the stars, two people who'd found each other through desperation and deception, who'd built something real and lasting from the strangest of foundations. A human woman who'd become a vampire queen, a lonely king who'd learned to love again. The debt that had brought them together was long paid and pardoned, but the debt of the heart, the beautiful obligation of love freely given and returned, would continue through all the centuries ahead. In the distance, the city sparkled with lights. Somewhere beyond it, the vampire court discussed policy and politics. Tomorrow, there would be councils to attend, decisions to make, a kingdom to govern. But tonight, there was only this moment, this garden, this love. And for two people who'd both been drowning in their own ways before finding each other, that was more than enough. It was everything. Maren Grey, now Maren Blackthorne, vampire queen and co-ruler, had wed a king to escape her debt, never knowing he ruled the whole kingdom. And in doing so, she'd found not just financial freedom, but a love that would last lifetimes, a purpose that fulfilled her, and a future she could never have imagined. The debt was paid, the kingdom was thriving, and the love story that had started with a desperate signature on a marriage contract had become the kind of epic romance that would be told in vampire courts for centuries to come. Not because it was easy or simple or conventional, but because it was real. Two people choosing each other, again and again, through every challenge and revelation. And that, Maren thought as Priam held her close under the eternal stars, was worth more than all the wealth and power in the world.